Well, welcome, everybody. This is our, sixth meeting of the Committee on Human Services to discuss affordable housing issues. We are being taped tonight, not live, but we are being taped by Cable Access TV. So first, I want to welcome everybody to our meeting. Just a very brief piece now. We've had a discussion about, in general, and all our discussions overlap. All of our presentations and overlap, but we've been very fortunate to have a number of good presenters, and we look forward to the presentations this evening. We've had just a general discussion about the need for affordable housing in Watertown, and an interesting discussion about zoning as it affects housing. Discussion about what resources are available from the state and some nonprofit organizations. And last week we had a discussion about the nuts and bolts of creating affordable housing. And today we have a discussion about solutions and examples, some solutions and examples of what communities have done to create affordable housing. So we're very fortunate to have with us Kelly Donato, who is the Assistant Housing Director at Somerville, Cliff Cook, who is a member of the Watertown Housing Partnership, but is going to be speaking about his work and the other work that had taking place in Cambridge. Rachel Heller, who is with the Citizens Housing and Planning Association, and a little later on, we're going to hear from Will Brownsberger, who was unable to come to last week's meeting, but we're going to have him speak today. So before I begin, I just wanted to ask my colleagues, I'm Councilor Palumba. My right is Councilor Falkoff, and on my left is Councilor Bays, and our excellent Setanique, who is our note taker, who's been with us for quite a while. Either of you have opening remarks that you want to make?
No.
Okay, so the order that we thought we would do this tonight was Cliff is going to go first, and he's going first because he was the first one to plug in his PowerPoint. But he's going to go first, and then we'll hear from Ms. Donato about what's happening in Somerville. And then we're going to hear from Rachel and what the CHAPA can offer and has offered to other communities. And then we'll end up with Senator Brownsberger, who said he'd be here around 1:15. We usually try to go no more than 2 hours, but it really depends on the discussion and the interest that people have and the questions. We kind of leave this fairly loose so that our audience is basically in a large discussion group. And that has seemed to work out well. I do want to recognize a couple of people, though, for just out of courtesy. We're very happy to have with us Brian Costello, who is the Executive Director of the Watertown Housing Authority, and sitting next to him, though I forgot his name already, though I'm very, very pleased to have him.
It's Michael Lara, who's the new Assistant Director of the Watertown Housing Authority, and will be sitting on the new committee as designated by the board for the CPC.
Yes, so welcome.
Oh, great.
He's only been with the Housing Authority since May. But we're very happy to have you, and great to be on the CPC. That's wonderful. And again, Fred Reynolds, who's been with us just about every meeting as the chair of the Watertown Housing Partnership. And I do apologize because I forgot your name.
Helen Oliver.
Helen Oliver, who is also a member of the the Watertown Housing Partnership. We've been really fortunate to have the members of the Housing Partnership come to a lot of our meetings, and we appreciate it really quite a bit. And, okay, so we're going to turn it over to another member of the Watertown Housing Partnership, but he's got a different hat on. And let me introduce Cliff Cook, who's a Senior Planning Information Manager at the City of Cambridge. His experience in information management with a demonstrated history of working in government and administrative industry, skilled in nonprofits, urban planning, public speaking, municipalities, and demographics, and his strong operations and professional guidance from Cornell University. So with that, Cliff.
Copies of the presentations, let me give you one.
Yeah, we'll share that with our folks here.
Exactly the right number for us to know.
Do you want to, either one of you, I'll make copies later. Unless you want to write notes on it. If you want to write.
Whenever you're ready. Hello? Okay. I think it's working. Just oriented a little bit better. So thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. As Councilor Palumbo noted, I'm a member of the Housing Partnership Committee for the town of Watertown. My day job is I'm an urban planner with the City of Cambridge Community Development Department, where I'm the Senior Planning Information Manager. I deal with anything that has to do with data and planning. I work with all the various divisions we have. I spend a particularly large amount of time with our housing division. So while I will not pretend to be an expert in Cambridge's housing programs, there are people far more knowledgeable than I. I think I can give you the basics tonight. About Cambridge, the city was founded in the 1600s, around the same time as Watertown. There are about 113,000 residents. The city is comprised of 13 neighborhoods. We have 4 major educational institutions, Harvard, MIT, I'm sure you'll know about, Lesley University, and the Holt International School of Business, which is run by the EF Corporation in the North Point area, which is growing rapidly. We have about 140,000 people working in Cambridge during the day, so we have far more workers than we have residents, it would seem. Our housing stock consists of about, depending on how you count it, and I don't count it the same way the Census Bureau does, I'll tell you that right now. There's about 52,000 units, including units that are owned by the universities, and there's about 2,500 units that are currently under construction, about 3,500 units that are in the pipeline that are already approved, which will probably get built out over the next 10 years, we think, but I'm not going to put money on it because I've been wrong before. A little bit more about Cambridge here. So since I'm the planning information manager, I like to look at numbers a lot, so you'll have to bear with me as I give you one of my favorite types of slides here, which is a slide with way too many numbers. My presentation doesn't have much in the way of graphics, and I've put it together more so it can provide the bones of notes about the meeting, so hopefully you folks can listen and not have to read it. You wouldn't worry too much about reading along because you'll hear most of what's on the slides. I'll have that there for you. You can just use it as a frame for taking your notes if you wish. So with our housing stock, there's 54,700. It includes units that are under construction. We have about 8,100 affordable units in the city at this time, which has grown by about 1,000 units in the last 8 years. The greatest source of growth has been the inclusionary housing program, and I'll talk more about the nature of the program in Cambridge a little later. It differs a fair amount from the program in Watertown, though it flies under the same title. Our ratio of affordable housing is roughly around 15%, but it has been slowly slipping, as you can see, which is definitely a source of concern for us. And we've been working hard to try to exploit every opportunity we can to move the needle on that. Area median income, area median income is a number that the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development puts together. It's not the real median income, but is the metric that is used for determining affordability for virtually all types of housing that have an income limitation. As you can see, the area median income has increased fairly dramatically. In the last 10 years, it's gone up about $15,000, $16,000. If we were to look nationally, the number would have been pretty static, probably up until the last year or two. However, at the same time, the median condo sales price, and condos are the bulk of the housing market in Cambridge, has more than doubled. Pretty hard to imagine. I have some more notes on that. So let me see how this works. Please just bear with me. Oh, there's a mouse. Sorry. So the ratio of AMI income to median condo price went from 4.6 times. The price was 4.6 times the median income. Now it's 8.3. So this points to a problem of an overall lack of affordability in our market. It's happening certainly at the low income range, at the moderate income range, and the middle income range as well. As we tracked it over the years, the biggest drop-off that we've seen has been actually in the moderate income, the 50 to 80% range, and we're seeing that definitely creeping up into the 80 to 100, if not up to 120% at this time. We look at the composition of households in the city. Interestingly, the lower income households in Cambridge have not really budged much in number in quite a while. My theory is that most of those folks, they're earning under 50% of AMI. They're already in affordable housing, or they're in sort of special situations with family or friends, or they're college or graduate students who have a lot more sources of funds than their income might otherwise indicate. And this is something that you see in towns like Cambridge across the country. It's a fairly well-known issue. Jumping around a little bit here. So rents have gone up a lot. They haven't increased at the same rate as the housing prices have. The rate of increase has actually slowed a little bit in the last couple of years. It hasn't stopped by any means, but it's been, for a two-bedroom, it's been hovering around $2,700 to $2,900 now for about 2 years. And I think we can point to the rapid growth in the housing stock in Cambridge. And this is a point I'm going to make again and again, that if you want affordable housing, yes, you've got to build housing for those who can't afford it, but if you want to keep the overall market affordable, you have to develop housing on the market too. And while people will have various critiques of that, I think it's a really important component of keeping affordability present.
Can you repeat that last statement that you said?
Sure, that while it's important to develop housing specifically for those who cannot afford to live in your community, it's also important to develop housing on the open market. And while there are a variety of critiques of that, I think it's a very important thing that you need to do if you want to control prices overall. It's basic supply and demand. And part of the problem, I think, has been that there's been such a lack of housing development in this region for so long that you can drop a lot of supply in before you start to see an effect. But I think we are starting to see an effect in Cambridge. And you can see this in other parts of the country. Portland, Oregon, I think, has had a drop of about 2.5% in rent prices in the last year, and Seattle is showing signs of leveling off, if not dropping. Both cities, there's been a huge amount of housing development, as I understand it. So moving on just a little bit more. So cost burden refers to people that are paying more than 30% of their income. Severely cost burden are those who are paying more than 50% of their income. And as you can see, those numbers really haven't shifted very much when you take margin of error into account. They've been really pretty static now for the last 20 years or so.
Cliff?
Cliff,
Yes, sir.
I don't understand the line affordable rent / median asking the percentages there.
That's the percentage. So that's the, oh, that didn't get calculated properly. That's actually should be more like the inverse of that. So please ignore that line. The point was, if you take the median rent, multiply it by 12, and take that as a percentage of the AMI income, I think in 2016 it would be 26%.
Oh, okay.
So while it would seem in some ways that rents are affordable to the average household, quote unquote, in Cambridge, what you also see is that the rents that are actually being asked cluster very tightly around that median. So there's very little low end. There's some high end, but there's very little low end. And that's where the problem lies. So if there's any more questions, I'll move on now that I've drowned you in numbers. So I promise this is the last slide like this. So what underlies Cambridge's success, I would say, is the city's commitment to affordable housing. These are the City Council goals that were provisionally adopted back in 2016. The first goal concerns affordable housing. And the second goal concerns, really implicitly includes affordable housing as well, since economic and educational opportunity means the opportunity to live in Cambridge and send your kids to Cambridge schools, which the city pays a lot of attention to. And in the years that I've been in Cambridge, housing has pretty much been the number one or number two, then number one again issue the entire time. I've worked for the city for 23 years. People have talked about housing from the day I got there up until today. And I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. So I think my point here is that if you really want to move the needle on this, there really has to be a complete commitment by the organization, by the community, top to bottom. So I'm not going to say that we do this all ourselves. We have a pretty big housing staff. We have the luxury of a very big planning department in Cambridge that you don't usually see in this part of the world. But we have a lot of really good partners. The Cambridge Housing Authority is a really top-notch organization. Disclaimers, my first job out of graduate school was working there. We have very good affordable housing developers, nonprofits, HRI Homeowners Rehab, Justice Start are the two main ones. Developers who also provide services such as CASCAP. I think they may do some work in Watertown, in a transition house. And then housing managers who focus more on services like Heading Home, or in our case, Caritas Communities, which runs the old YMCA SRO. So having this network of partners means that when an opportunity comes along, we have organizations we can turn to help us exploit whatever the opportunity is. So who is served? We have housing programs that really run the gamut, all the way up to 120% of median income. The focus at this point really is on people that are 50 to 80, which is our inclusionary housing standard. And then we also allow people to live in inclusionary housing who have a Section 8 mobile voucher, so there's a lot of families in there that are earning under 50% of median. Our home ownership programs, those I think are focused on more 60 to 100, sometimes up to 120, depending on the program and the funding source. But you can see that there's quite a range of things that we do there. Let's see. Okay. So I've broken this up and didn't mean to end up with 9 bullets here, but this lays out the rest of the presentation. But the first 3 deal with resources that get put into developing affordable housing. The second 3 deal with how we're actually creating the housing. And the third is how we are ensuring access to housing. So we hit all the different parts of the spectrum there. So let's move on.
Could you repeat that one more time?
Sure. So the first 3 points, first 3 bullets, city funding, affordable housing trust, incentive zoning, those all deal with how we...
I'm on the wrong page, sorry.
Okay.
You're on the chart.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, go ahead. No,
Sure.
all right, so
Yep.
would you just go through that one more time then? The first is,
The first 3 bullets concern how we support housing, financially and otherwise. The second 3 is concerned more with the process of how we develop and preserve affordable housing. And the last 3 is how we ensure people have access to affordable housing who need it.
thank you.
So direct city support comes in a variety of ways. The bulk of Cambridge's CPA money goes toward affordable housing. Consistently has been 80% since 1994. I believe the 94 date, if I remember correctly, is not the year that CPA came into effect. The city had its own version of CPA before there was CPA. So I think this is counting all the way back to that city program that preceded CPA. So that's been to date, it's been over $190 million the city has committed. Going forward, we're going to commit 25% of funds that are raised from building permits, which is pretty substantial in Cambridge. If you look around, we have literally billions of dollars of commercial construction going on right now, and that's probably going to be going on for a bit longer. And then the FY19 capital budget also includes an allocation of about $3.5 million. I'm not as familiar with the history there, but I don't think this is the first time that's been the case. Also, while the opportunities are rare, the city has provided property for affordable housing development. There's not a lot of cases where that's occurred, but there are a handful. Municipal property in Cambridge, as in Watertown, is pretty hard fought over, as you might imagine. But these are some of the ways the city puts financial resources in to help offset the cost for a developer. So the primary channel for funding is the city's Affordable Housing Trust. I know there was some discussion of affordable housing trusts at a prior one of these meetings, I think from Mass Housing Partnership. I think it's actually a good idea myself. It was established in 1988. It's chaired by the city manager. The trust is effectively Cambridge's housing partnership. We don't have a housing partnership committee as such. So it acts as a housing partnership committee. It tends to have a bit more authority, I think. It's comprised of experts in various aspects of housing finance, policy, and development. People on the board are pretty involved in policy development and approval for our housing programs that their board helps funding. The advantage of this board is it allows for really very flexible terms and very quick action at times as well, when that's necessary. Much more so than would be the case if, let's say, not to speak ill of them, if our city council had to weigh in. It would be much more of a process. So having the trust sit separately, acting on the direction of the council, fulfilling the council's policies, enables us to move in an expeditious manner many times. So some of the things they do, they offer pre-development, acquisition, construction, and permanent financing. They support the efforts of local housing development organizations. They preserve existing financing, existing affordable housing, and that has been a big source of expense for the city, as I'll talk a little bit more further on. And they finance the acquisition and rehabilitation of existing properties, and that can be anything from buying buildings to demolish, to buildings to rehab, to the rare open parcel when it occurs, buying condominiums, helping offset various kinds of expenses in various kinds of other deals. They fund the financial assistance program for home buyers, which I'll speak more about, help with site acquisition and pre-development loans, construction, mezzanine, and permanent financing tailored to each development's needs. I took that off their webpage. I don't pretend to be a housing finance expert. Incentive zoning, this is our quaint name for what you would call linkage in most places. I don't know why we call it incentive zoning, but our lawyers say we have to, so we do. Developers make contributions to offset the increased housing costs that are associated with new commercial developments. How do you determine that? We have something that's called a nexus study that we have to have done every few years, where we have economists come in and they say, if you're going to build a building with 500 biotech employees, you're going to need so many people to run their HVAC and be janitors and work in the fast food restaurants. They're going to serve them at lunch and do all the other things that they need to do, work in the store, CVS when they go and buy sundries. So those folks need to find a place to live in Cambridge, or some portion of them. We base that portion on various census data they look at, but only so many can find a place to live here. Here's how much we think it would cost to house the rest of them. And there's pages and pages of numbers, and you come out with a per square foot cost. Currently, that's $15. That really is not the full amount it should be. It probably would be up near $30 to $40, which would just be unmanageable. We're going to do another nexus study fairly soon, updating the housing nexus and also starting to look at jobs linkage as well, which is something I don't know a whole lot about. Incentive zoning has been administered again by the Housing Trust, over $5 million since inception. There are a lot of large commercial buildings that are going to be coming online in the next 6 months to 8 months in Cambridge, and since the payments come at certificate of occupancy, we expect to see a pretty large influx of funds in the near future there. So that is a source of funding that has not been a major one in the last few years, but has in the past and will be again. So affordable housing development. We are always looking at opportunities. It's really, in some respects, our housing division functions like a developer. They are talking to realtors constantly. They're going out to look at property. They're evaluating it. They're running the numbers to see if they can make things work. If they can make things work, they start to talk to partners and to the trust, an executive session, trying to see if they can put a deal together. When they're not building biotech, they're building affordable housing. So some of the ways we can create affordability through new construction, that's the thing that tends to get the most notice. Acquisition and rehab of existing multifamily housing. That is less the case right now because the cost of housing units on the open market is just prohibitively high, and frankly probably unrealistic to be sustained in the long term. Conversion of non-residential buildings, we've seen that done in a few cases. Condominium acquisition, that goes back into home buyer work, and also buy down of home buyer costs. That refers to our Homebridge program, which I'll talk more about later. So why are rents so high in Cambridge? Just to add a little bit of a note there. One of the things we've done some analysis looking at rents in Cambridge and comparing them to other communities, and there appears to be something like a $500 a month premium just to put the word Cambridge in your address compared to Smerville or Alston. On top of that, there's a premium you pay to live near a red line station. So this drives the rents higher, and higher rents are driving the costs higher. So that's sort of the fundamental equation we're dealing with right now. This all said, we have a number of projects we're working on. Two I know I can talk about. We have a development, Linwood Court, in a neighborhood called the Port, which is an affordable housing development that's being refinanced. And they're going to build 23 units in a parking lot there, which is a pretty significant addition for that part of town. And you all may have noticed that there is a new building going up on Concord Avenue across from Fresh Pond, a bit closer to Neville Manor beyond the golf course. That's a 98-unit all-affordable building. It's the largest all-affordable building the city's built in quite a few years. And I think HRI are the ones who are developing that one. I'm not sure who's doing the Squirrel brand.
So when you say the city built, that is actually new construction, and you're saying that your housing trust in that
Up
way,
front.
acts like a developer, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, it's a very, as is the case for something that big, it's a very complicated deal with a lot of moving parts. I know there are state funds in there, federal funds in there, low-income tax credits in there, and other things I don't know about, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Let's hold our questions to
Yeah,
Yes,
that-
I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
should have.
yeah, I appreciate that. Housing preservation, I'm not as familiar with this in Watertown as maybe I should be, but I know we have a number of expiring use projects in Cambridge. We've been successful so far at preserving, I think, all but one of them. There's some other units that we lost that had zoning restrictions that were kind of mushy and not as well written as maybe they should have been. But in terms of true federally subsidized expiring use, we've been able to, I think, preserve all of them. And probably looks like our track record's going to be continuing with some other projects that are being worked on right now. So we've also assisted the Housing Authority at times. The Housing Authority has converted, I think at this point, just about all of their state-assisted family housing to the federal RAD program. And we've put money into those projects in some cases to help with the conversion. The most recent one was the conversion of Jefferson Park, which again, that's off Ringe Avenue near the towers. There was an old 3-story brick walk-up state public housing development there. It was torn down and replaced with something that looks very, very new, and very modern. Still public housing, just funded differently.
What was the name of that program?
Jefferson, it's
The federal.
RAD, which is, I think it's for converting public housing into Section 8, essentially. Rachel's looking like
So
maybe.
it is.
It is, okay, Brian,
Assistant Demonstration Program.
there you go.
Brand assisted, thank you.
Yeah. Which for the Housing Authority, that completed a very long process of updating their state-assisted public housing, which started back in the 80s. So far, I think it's a little bit dated, but 8 properties of over 500 units have been preserved, and then that were expiring use, and 440 other units were recapitalized and preserved in unit developments that were not meeting the strict definition of federal expiring use. Let's move on. Oh, well, moved on for me. So inclusionary zoning, that's something I know a bit more about. We have it in Watertown. Our program here is different than the program in Cambridge. We have a higher threshold, 10 units or 10,000 square feet. We have a higher requirement, 20% of gross floor area. We used to use a formula that involved units, but we switched to gross floor area, so it gives us a little bit of flexibility to negotiate around unit size, because the big push for us is to get family-size units, 2 or 3 bedrooms. No one builds anything more than 3 bedrooms in the developments we're looking at here. There's a density bonus of up to 30% of gross floor area, but that's still subject to zoning restrictions, so developers cannot always take full advantage of that, but typically they will if they can. Again, as I mentioned, the unit mix is subject to negotiation. There's a permanent deed restriction on specific units in a building. Here, in our program, we can pick the units at the outset, but then once the unit vacates, it floats. So you may pick unit 2, but depending on the process of events, it may end up with unit 4 being the replacement for unit 2. For us, unit 2 is always going to be the affordable unit. Unit 2 is always unit 2. It has the same finishes as the rest of the building. The units are scattered throughout the building. We get high value and low value units, so we get them on the top floors and the bottom floors just like everybody else. There's no off-site or in lieu of payments allowed. That's not even an option, unlike in Boston, where there's a lot of that. I'll say no more about it. If a new requirement we have is fractional unit payments, so let's say you have to provide 20,000 square feet in affordable units. If you get up to 19,500 feet, say 19,700 feet, 300 square feet is left, that's not enough for a unit, you have to buy that down. And I think the current price for buy down is $395 per square foot, which I think encourages developers to try to provide us with the biggest units they can. Since Cambridge is well over the 10% state housing inventory requirement, the 40B requirement, we don't have to follow DHCD rules, and I'm not sure that our program actually would be strictly following DHCD rules. I'm not sure if these units are counted in the housing inventory or not. I don't think that the state pays a lot of attention to our keeping the housing inventory up to date, because they know that we are over 10%. But we keep our own inventory, which is that 8,100 number I referred to earlier. There's about 700 occupied units in the rental pool, about 100 under construction. There's about 200 home ownership units. Almost all the production in recent years has been rental, that we just got 6 home ownership units. That was the largest home ownership inclusionary development in quite a long time. So here we're moving into talking about how we ensure people get affordable housing. With all of our inclusionary units, we do all the lease up. We essentially we market that as a service to developers, and it is a service to them because it means they don't have to income qualify people. When we bring them a prospective tenant, we've already done a lot of the pre-qualification for them. They may still want to do a credit check, they may still want to run a query, whatever their specific requirements are, but they know that these people are going to meet the program requirements and they're not going to have a hard time from us. So we have a single comprehensive application process which screens and ranks the applicants. We housed about 180 households in the last 2 years. There's a fairly complicated point system with a very heavy preference for current Cambridge residents. Additional preference for people in emergency need and for households with children under 6 and with children under 18. So the children preference is doubled if you have children under 6. Or if there's an emergency need would be no fault eviction, code violation, rent burden over 50%, overcrowding, meaning more than 2 people per bedroom in your household, or if you're homeless and living in a shelter. Rents are all at 30% of your gross household income. Here we typically set them at 65 or 30% of 65 or 80% of AMI, which can be difficult for a lot of moderate income households to make. That 80%, there's a big difference between 65% and 80% in terms of what people can afford. But that was one of the reasons I was happy to see us expand some of our rent levels to 65% level recently. So I think the last update we did to inclusionary here. So for rental and property managers, they don't need to maintain a separate list. They just call us up and they say, Emily, Tony Palumbo's moving out and we need to fill this inclusionary unit, and we're on it. And we go to our waiting list, we look at the unit, we inspect it to make sure it's in good shape. We run a lottery of tenants who meet the qualifications based on their point ranking, and we go from there. We also assist with housing choice voucher lease-ups, which are more complicated. So it takes that whole burden off of the landlord. It also means they don't have the opportunity to discriminate against Section 8 holders in inclusionary units. And if there are issues, we work with the landlord and the tenant to try to resolve them. And there are issues sometimes, unfortunately, sometimes on the tenant side, sometimes on the landlord side. Our home buyer program, we run first-time home buyer classes ourselves, which I think you need to take in order to pre-qualify for some of our other programs. So while we do get some home ownership units through inclusionary, those are pretty few and far between now. Our main home ownership program is something called HomeBridge. And the idea here is that we pre-qualify you based on your income and what you can afford. And then you go out and you look on the open market for a unit that meets that you can afford and that meets our price guidelines, which I can tell you if you're interested. So once you find that unit, we will buy down between 40 and 50% of the purchase price. So for example, a 3-bedroom unit that costs up to $825,000 will qualify for our program. We will buy down 50% of that, so you only end up paying $412,500. And we get a 3-bedroom unit with a permanent deed restriction for affordability for about $400,000, which you might be hard-pressed to build it for in this day and age. So it's a pretty good deal for the people in the program, and it's a pretty good deal for the city, because these folks get a place they can afford to live in Cambridge, and we get a permanent affordable unit. When they leave, we have right of first refusal to buy because of the CPA funds and others we have available. We can buy the units back from them. We can do renovations on the unit if necessary, then put it back out for sale.
Do they have to sell to you? You're going so fast, so
I'm sorry.
I can go back to my questions.
I'm writing them down.
I'm trying to leave time for everybody. We also have a down payment assistance program that's run with home money and all the requirements there. Or I should say HomeBridge is, I think, 60 to 80% of median income, up to 120 if there's money available from the right pool. Inclusionary housing, I think there, it's 50 to 100% of median income qualifies you for inclusionary home ownership. Down payment assistance is up to 80% of HUD AMI, and I won't bore you with what that means, but it's different than 80% of the AMI that we use. Once you're into home money, you're into all the federal program requirements. And then we also have a resale pool, which is anything that gets sold by a prior affordable home buyer. We buy back and then we put it back out ourselves after renovation. So we also have a HIP, our home improvement repair program, lower no-cost financing for home repairs. I believe it's run through with home money. I'm not an expert in home or CDBG. There are people who are, and I have to defer to them more in the details. But the objective there is really looking for households that are low income, high equity, and who don't have the ability to tap that equity because they are retired, unemployed, disabled, bad credit history, and they're in danger of not being able to live in their home anymore and actually losing their home in some cases, either to because they simply they aren't able to manage to live there if they're disabled, or because they have no heat in some cases. The house is on the verge of being condemned. So we've assisted more than 400 units for the last 10 years in that program. Let's see, so just a little more broadly, what lies behind this is policy, the policy commitment we have to affordable housing. Envision Cambridge is our newer comprehensive plan project, which we're supposed to wrap up before the end of the year. I can hardly wait. There are 6 major goal areas, and one of them is housing, affordable housing specifically. There's some kind of hard-to-read notes there, but I have a handout on Envision that I can also give you if you're interested. But there's a wide range of actions that we've targeted as part of the Envision plan. A couple of zoning ideas that we're testing, but we're not ready to bring forward with any kind of proposal this time. One is a citywide affordable housing overlay that would probably double, or some plus or minus, say, double the allowable density throughout the city for all affordable developments, 100% affordable developments. This wouldn't apply to inclusionary, it would apply essentially to affordable housing developers like a Justice Start or an HRI or a CASCAP. There's also talk of goosing up inclusionary to what we call super inclusionary, which would be more of appealing to the private sector developers. I'm not sure that's going to work. It probably would involve additional floor area bonuses, and I don't think that people have an appetite for that at this time. Other policy initiatives, we're always seeking opportunities to improve our position. We're a housing choice community. We were an active participant in the Metro Mayor's Housing Task Force, which set a goal of housing for the inner core region, and then is now looking for commitments from individual cities to try to meet that goal, I think of 180,000 units. So that's what I have. I'm sorry if I went too quickly for everybody.
Thank you very much, Cliff. I'm going to ask the members of the committee first if you have any questions.
Got a bunch.
I'll try to answer them, but I may have to
I'm going to try to read
defer.
my notes.
Sure, I'm sorry.
I had, can you give us an example? You talked about multiple partners that help make use of opportunities for, that was at the very beginning. Do you
Yeah. Well, I'm referring there to the Housing Authority, which also has a couple nonprofits that they control, to organizations like Homeowners Rehab.
I thought you didn't have a housing authority.
We do, Cambridge Housing
We don't
Authority.
have a housing partnership.
Partnership, oh,
no,
housing,
the
the
housing
housing authority
partnership.
is the housing, okay, yes,
Well,
got it.
we have the Affordable Housing Trust, which really acts like the partnership committee for Cambridge.
Okay,
That's the equivalent organization there. But we do have a housing authority. They also have a couple nonprofits. There's Homeowners Rehab, which is, I think, concerned pretty much entirely with affordable housing development. Justice Start, which also runs job training programs and tries to tie the two together sometimes. They have Justice Start Youth Build. CASCAP, CASCAP is the one. There's another organization with a similar name I get confused about. CASCAP focuses on developing housing for people with additional needs, people that are mentally disabled, mentally ill, elderly, physically disabled in some cases, but they provide housing with services as a rule. A couple others I mentioned. Homebridge is a fairly small organization that what they do is, I believe they rent units. In some cases, they rent inclusionary units through special agreements with us, and then they turn around and they tenant those units with people that are formerly homeless who have to receive services as a condition of living there. So it's sort of, I think, the housing first approach is what they're doing. We have a couple fairly large SROs. The YWCA still runs their own single-room occupancy building, and then there is another one that is in the YMCA building that's now run by Caritas Communities. So those are just some of the partners that we have. They're also, I should also, they're also private sector developers we work
Go
with.
ahead, Councilor.
So one of the other questions was, why were housing units at risk to lose their affordability? What was the situation?
The federally subsidized, privately owned, federally subsidized housing was written initially with 20-year, well, I think it was a 40-year mortgage with a payoff allowed after 20 years. So those types of developments are called expiring use. And at the 20-year mark, a developer can say, you know what, I'm done. I can triple my rent. I'm leaving the program. I think there's some transition allowed for people that are living there who have a housing need. But an example of this is, I think it's Huron Tower, which is on Huron Avenue across from the Fresh Pond Golf Course. That was an affordable housing, all affordable building at one time. It was expiring use. The owner converted to market rate, and now it's luxury condominium, a luxury apartment building, I guess. It's actually the same design as the buildings, the Ringe Ave towers. If you look closely, it's just a different color brick, but it's the same building, almost exactly.
Does anyone know if any of ours are at risk, or
We don't have it.
we don't have any of that, right? Okay,
Don't have
it was just.
Thank you.
We do, we have the Arsenal apartments.
Yeah, the Arsenal apartments, I think,
Oh, are they?
expiring use.
Really? Are they up for?
There's people in the audience who would know the answer to that question better than I do.
Yeah.
So there are, Arsenal Apartments, Beaverbrook Step, Brigham House, Assisted Living, the Coolidge, and St. Joseph's Hall are all,
Expiring use?
they're expiring use. It doesn't mean that they will be
Right,
lost. You
right,
can
but-
pay effort
but-
at the state level, locally to preserve them. But yes, they have, let me second, sorry, read it on my phone. When the expiration date is on Arsenal is 2033. On Beaverbrook is 2025. I'm not sure of the other two right now.
Thank you.
I would also note that there's a big difference, I think, in these cases when you're dealing with a for-profit versus a nonprofit developer.
Yes.
Beaverbrook Step, St. Joseph's Hall, which is Metro West Housing Collaborative,
Right.
they're going to want to play ball with you. A private sector developer, it depends. I mean, I think we are probably pretty aggressive negotiators with a pretty big purse in Cambridge, which gives us some leverage. We've been able to engineer the sale of a lot of expiring use buildings to various nonprofits. So I think there's a couple that have stayed in the for-profit sector, but not many have. At least to date.
Question?
I have one more. I had a lot, but I've limited it.
Thank you.
What is super inclusionary?
It's a term of art. It means instead of giving a developer, instead of getting 20% of your floor area for inclusionary, you get 30%. But in return, we give you something more. And I shouldn't say anything more than that. I'd probably get yelled at if people even knew I was talking about it. But it's an idea that's been kicked around. But essentially, you're buying more inclusionary, more affordable housing space by giving the developer more opportunity to profit more.
I do have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
On that very subject,
Yeah.
I was confused about changing the number of units to square footage.
Yes.
I don't get that.
Well, we use a very confusing system I will not try to explain. Most communities, it's usually 10 to 15% of the units in a development.
Right.
But then, let's say you get a development that has, say, 30 units and there's 2 3-bedrooms, and you have to provide 10% of your units as inclusionary. The developer might say, well, you can have one bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, but you can't have a 3. And you can't have a 3 because they're not even 10% of the floor space. They're not even 10% of the housing stock in this building. If we're asking for floor area, we can say, not only do we want 3s, I think in fact we require that for every 6,000 square feet of inclusionary floor area, there has to be 1 3-bedroom provided. So it gives us more flexibility to get away from the small units, which is sometimes difficult to lease up, particularly the studios. And I think we've seen that in Watertown as well. You can lease them, but it takes longer, whereas there is just enormous need for family-size units.
And the units always need to be equal to the other units in the building.
Finishes and quality, yeah, all the time.
You said something confusing about if someone leaves, you can substitute a different unit.
Well, the way inclusionary works in Watertown is that we pick a set of units initially scattered through the building, but then once someone moves out of one of those units, it may be that the replacement for that inclusionary tenant may not happen in that initial unit. It may happen in another unit of the same size elsewhere in the building. So
Well,
also, what you could have the developer who is not favorably disposed is over time, they can maneuver their affordable units into a particular part of the building.
right, and I've known that to happen in Watertown, or you can not even.
But I should also say that I believe the way the state rules are written, we are not allowed to deed restrict specific units. I think we have to do it this way. Whereas in Cambridge, they're not concerned about meeting the SHI requirements, so they have deed restrictions.
Well, it can also happen that the developer can not just wait for someone to move out, but can say, oh, we're going to redo this unit, and so you have to move to this other unit down the other end or on the
Yeah.
back of the building or whatever.
Yeah, and then, well, now you still have the units, you can't complain, you can't move back, and I can rent that a unit from more anyway.
I'm sorry?
I'm just playing that out. It's a way of increasing
Yeah,
your total
right,
revenue.
and who's the, how is that supervised?
In Cambridge?
No, here.
Here, I'm not sure. That would be a question more for Andrea Adams and Jennifer Van Campen. They can
Okay,
they
well,
can
so
speak to that specifically.
I would sort of ask the people on the housing partnership to keep that question in mind.
Let me,
Advantage of having these units circulate, which is supposed to be, is that we have a person in an affordable unit, and they qualify for that unit. The idea is that they get better educated, they get a better job. Now they don't qualify based on income. So are we gonna make them move out of the unit, or just make that unit market rate?
Yeah.
And the affordable unit.
Maybe someplace else.
Yeah, that's true.
So
And-
we're not forcing people.
So it's not, but it can be abused.
Yeah.
If family size changes and the east field gets one of the bigger apartments or
Right.
whatever,
Yeah.
it's then to provide some flexibility. I think you're right to be worried about, quality.
There are pluses and minuses to both policies.
let me ask one question, and I'm going to have the audience, members of the, ask questions, but we're going to we have a lot to cover tonight.
No, you
and this is very helpful. I just want to go to the page that says direct city support.
Oh,
Just, it says 7, page 7.
do I get for closing the presentation?
Page 7, direct city, you don't need to open it up
Okay,
again,
page
that's
7.
okay. I just wanted to, dedicated permit fees. Dedicated permit fees. So we have a lot of fees, a significant, not a lot, but a significant portion of our annual revenue comes in from fees.
Yes.
As more development takes place, we get this printout every week of all the fees, building fees. Are you saying that 25% of all the fees gets put into the Affordable Housing Trust?
25% of building permit fees. 25% of building permit fees only. And this is, I think, a relatively new action.
That's what I
on our
mean,
part.
building permit, yeah.
This is a
It's-
relatively new action on the part of the city.
It's relatively new?
Yes.
Okay. And then general revenue, we don't,
Well, and I should just say, we'll wait to see how it exactly plays out. I'm not sure if, when people say 25% of building fees, if they're saying, the implicit assumption is that they're net of something that we don't know about yet, or I don't know about, so. But there will be some amount of dedicated fees going forward as a source of income.
that's great.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Thanks. So Cambridge is more than 3 times the size of Watertown. And so I'm keeping that in mind as I ask this question, but how big is you have so much affordable housing and so much going on. How many staff people do you have working on this?
I think it was 14 the last I counted.
Oh,
and they're
my
hiring more.
God.
I know. It's like we're running a development office.
Yeah, you are.
We're running
So
a
let me get this.
And a management office, too, because we're doing these lease-ups.
Can I ask a question, because you're on the same page?
Sure, let me just ask the second part of the question was, general revenue.
Yes.
From the tax base, from the tax.
Operating revenue.
Do you actually take money from your operating funds and you put it into the Affordable Housing Trust?
I believe that we have at times. I don't know that it's been done every year. but
Okay.
that they would be-
Okay.
have it in our bond prospectus that I was just working on. So, yeah, we have been doing it recently.
Well,
Doesn't happen every year, though. I mean,
it depends on the budget.
yeah, I mean, funds, operating funds wax and wane. Building permit fees wax and wane, too, I'll also note.
Yeah, but still, it's a commitment.
Yeah.
As long as we're talking about fees, I appreciate that Tony's letting me ask the question. But the CPA, you say 80% goes towards affordable housing, but how can that be given the restrictions of CPA are 10, 10, and 10, and then up to 5% for administration? That would leave 65% plus 10. With the affordable housing would be 75. I'm a little.
My understanding is that we put 80% in. 10% goes to parks, 10% to historical, 80% to housing. We may just be absorbing the 5% for administration. I wouldn't be surprised.
The CPA fund doesn't go to arts. It goes to housing, open space and recreation.
Yes, that's
and
what I said.
historic.
I said parks, not arts.
Oh, okay.
Parks.
But I still don't know how you get to the 80.
So 10.
10%.
10%
Historic.
for
10% parks.
parks, 10% for historical,
Okay.
and another 10% for housing, 30, and then the rest of the 70 gets put in housing. So 10 and 7
She's talking about the
is
5%.
80. They don't do this
They
5%.
do the 5%.
They must eat it somehow.
Yeah, I mean, it's covered by other programming, I'm sure.
You got 14 staff, you don't need that.
And we've got lots of finance staff as well, so I'm sure this is a minor additional amount of work in the overall scheme of things for us.
Okay.
Still going back to fees again, you talk about linkage fees of that per square foot
Yes.
to support. Now, Cambridge has a number of buildings, because we're dealing with this at another issue. What do you do with multi-use buildings? If a building is multi-use where it is including both housing and, let's say, office space, does the housing portion then come under the inclusionary zoning portion, so they don't pay linkage fees, or linkage fees only applicable to a solely commercial building?
There has to be a minimum square footage of commercial area. I don't recall what it is. I think 30,000 square feet. So in many mixed-use buildings really are mixed-use because the first floor is commercial and the rest of the building is residential. It's very, very rare to find a building that is mixed throughout, and I know this because I've gone through the entire Cambridge Assessing Database multiple times. There's only a tiny handful of buildings in the city that are like that. Virtually all of our mixed-use buildings would be commercial, retail on the first floor, maybe the second, and then everything else upstairs is residential.
Because I believe there was an order that one person, well, one outfit that wanted to build a commercial building had to build a residential building to get that permit. I was told that, so
I'm not familiar with that case. I mean, when people come to us with planned unit development areas, usually there's an expectation there'll be housing in there as well, even if it's a developer that's not particularly keen in developing housing.
Okay,
So, yeah, yeah.
okay. Thank you, Cliff.
You're welcome.
I want to introduce Senator Will Brownsberger, who's with us. Do you want to sit on this side, Will? Wherever you want. I want you to sit over here.
I would like to add the recently re-elected Senator
Just a
Brownsberger.
second. Thank you, Will. So- Okay, so we're going to have Kelly Donato speak next, and Kelly is going to talk a bit about, not a bit, quite a bit, actually, about what's happening in Somerville, which has become the go-to community for a lot of different things, including housing, but everybody often refers to Somerville as an example of good policies. So we're happy to have you, and thank you.
Good evening. Thanks, sir. Thanks for the invitation. So I serve as the Assistant Housing Director. I've served in that position
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot.
for, since 2015, and I've worked for the city for just shy of 12 years now. So I wanted to start off first with some brief information about Somerville. Its population, as of the 2010 census, was 75,754, and it's the most densely populated municipality in New England and the 16th most densely populated incorporated municipality in the country. Somerville, like Watertown, is 4.1 square miles, and we've got approximately 33,000 housing units. And of those, 66% are rental. And just a sad statistic, last year, the Somerville Housing Authority issued 50 vouchers. Of those, 21 ended up getting returned because they couldn't find housing, and only 6 were used in Somerville. So it's just really sad because these wait lists are so long, and people think that once they're going to get a voucher, their housing problems are solved, and that's not always the case. So I wanted to first start by identifying some 10 housing priorities that the mayor set forth in 2018 in January. And these have been a large area of our focus for the past year. The first is establishing an Office of Housing Stability. You may have heard that Boston has one, and so far we've been able to hire a director, and right now they're in the process of putting forth a business plan to the Board of Aldermen. But the hope is that really they can focus on the services and help with the housing search, and really for the housing division to focus on housing production. The next area is a transfer charge on real estate taxes. And this would allow for funds to be dedicated to the creation of affordable housing and preservation. And so a home rule petition was passed unanimously by our Board of Aldermen in May of 2018 and was filed with the state legislature. And when the legislative session ended, it was in committee, so we're going to need to refile again. The third area is forming a land trust. And to date, we've established a working group, and most recently, that working group met with the Vermont Land Trust. The fourth area is revising our condo conversion ordinance. And really that is to strengthen protections for occupants of rental units that are being converted to condos. And that, right now, we have a revision before the Board of Aldermen, their legislative committee. And just to give you a sense of what we're dealing with in Somerville, between 2010 and 2017, we had a total of 1,130 units, rental units, that were converted.
Converted
27,
from,
Right, from rental to condominiums.
how many?
1,130 total. Right now, we've got approximately 5,359 condo units in Somerville. And really, that's been a catalyst for displacement. So we're really focusing in on areas around notification requirements, strengthening a right to purchase, relocation assistance, and trying to tackle the problem of property owners vacating units in advance of selling to a third party. And then our fifth area of focus is relaunching a lead paint program. We received a $2 million grant from HUD, and we're hoping that we'll increase our supply of family-sized housing stock that's in compliance with lead-based paint requirements. And then,
can we stop a second?
Sure.
I apologize, I'm just looking at your notes at how much you're going to cover.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe it would be helpful if either of the two counselors have questions on the first 5 initiatives. Kelly's going to talk about a number of other things, the 100 homes and some other programs, but these 5 initiatives, do you have any questions on them that we just heard so far?
No, I just have a comment on the statistics. So Somerville is the same size as Watertown with more than twice as many people.
Unbelievable.
That was really striking.
Do you have something?
I was just,
Much better transportation, which is good.
Go ahead.
I was curious about the revised ordinance to make it harder to do the condo conversion. What exactly did that entail?
so we've had a condo conversion ordinance since, I believe, 1989. And what we've tried to do is they have to come before a board, they have to pay a fee, they have to explain about the notice they provided to their tenants. Right now, it's 1 year, 2 years if they're elderly, disabled, or low to moderate income. And then they have to provide relocation assistance. What we're finding is that a lot of the times now, the owners are driving out tenants in preparation for selling the property. And so, and a lot of these tenants, when that's happening, they're not getting, they may not know that there could potentially be an intent to convert, depending on who's purchasing. Sometimes that's made aware in advance, sometimes it's not. And they may not have a right to purchase the property, and they're not getting to take advantage of the relocation assistance. So most of the applications that come before our condo review board are unfortunately for vacant units. So one of the things we've been looking at is perhaps making them try to wait a year. So maybe they won't try to drive out tenants in advance of the sale.
I just had a quick question, because State Representative Conley was here and talking about the and I know that Councilor Mark Niedergang did quite a bit of work on this. Is it now, what was the percentage? I'm just interested in, that went to the home rule. How much was it? Was it 1%?
Oh, it was unanimous across the
No, not the
board.
vote, the percentage on the tax.
Oh, the tax?
Was it 1% or 2%?
It might have been 1.5.
1.5? And this is over a certain,
It was certain sorts of properties.
And it was-
They had built in some exemptions.
okay, that's it, okay,
I have a copy of that somewhere.
okay. Okay, so then the next 5. All right, thank you.
Next 5. So number 6 is the zoning overhaul. Our last update was in the 1990s. Right now, that's before the Board of Aldermen Land Use Committee. We've been trying to do this now for a few years. We had presented a revision earlier and spent a great deal of a year and a half shopping that out to the community, getting a lot of great feedback and input. And we regrouped, took another look at it, we addressed every single comment that we received, and we received many. And so hopefully that'll go through, but that's going to be important for us going forward. And some of the areas we want to really unlock the potential in, like Boynton Yards, Inner Belt, Brick Bottom, parts of Union Square. So areas that really we haven't been able to use as residential, we're hoping to do so. The next is creating a new emergency rent stabilization program. And we're currently in the process of meeting with providers in the community to identify gaps in what programs exist already. The city does fund 2 programs. One is the tenancy stabilization. We provide up to $3,000 of one-time assistance for households for things like first month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit. Then we also fund through CPA as well as our home funds, something we call our PASS program. It's up to 2 years of housing assistance. So it's transitional assistance for households. And really, at one point, when it first started, it really helped to kind of bridge the gap for households that were on the waiting list for a Section 8 voucher. What we're finding now is the waiting list well exceeds 10 years or more. So it's not so much of a bridge anymore, but households really need this. So it's a really popular program. And just like Watertown, we're looking into regulating commercialized home sharing. And really that's to protect our rental properties for full-time tenancies and also to try to maintain neighborhood stability. So that's in process right now, and we've been having a lot of community discussions and input around that. The 9th area is looking into creating a district improvement financing for affordable housing, and that's where you designate real estate tax revenue from either a particular project or development area to use those funds for affordable housing. So we've had some conversations with bond counsel, and we're looking for an opportunity there. And the 10th area is implementing a right to purchase program. So Washington, D.C. Is an example of a community that already has one. What we're hoping to do is give tenants the option to purchase their unit at fair market value to prevent displacement, and also to perhaps designate another third party to be able to step in and purchase.
A nonprofit, for example?
Exactly.
So
So that would require a home rule petition if we were to move forward with this.
So, questions on the last five?
I'm okay.
I have one on the, can you, just the ninth one, the one about, can you just do the ninth one?
Yeah, the district
Yes, what was the
improvement financing.
right,
It's
where you said you would take a portion of a developer's, so could you give us, how would that work, let's say, for the Arsenal project, Arsenal Yards?
So you would designate that particular project, and then the tax revenue that you receive from that gets put into a special fund that you could use for affordable housing
Okay, thank you.
for over a period of
Is
time.
anybody else in the,
Well, you can designate, I think you can designate up to 100% of it, but it's over a specific period of time.
and that could be done in your town, in your city, it could be done without alderman approval?
That we would need alderman
You would,
approval,
okay.
yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions on the 10 priorities?
Yes.
Go ahead.
The emergency rent stabilization program, I understand part A, Kelly, which is assisting with first, last, and security deposit for people. That's a lot of money to lay out for people. Can you talk again about part B, which is, you called it home, I believe, saying up to 2 years housing assistance to bridge the voucher?
Right, our PASS program, it provides up to 2 years for households to get a housing assistance. It's almost like a Section 8 voucher for the period of 2 years, up to 2
So you're
years.
essentially paying rent for that family?
They're paying 30% of their gross income,
You're paying.
and we're paying the rest up to a payment standard that we've established.
Thank you.
And that's just 2 examples of programs that we currently have in the city, but we're exploring other options. But I think that's really important, because a lot of times families really need that time to, kind of stabilize and get back on their feet. So it's a really important program.
Yes?
Is there any specific way that differs from the Section 8 program, other than the fact that it's only for 2 years? Like the way it's run, 30% similar to Section 8, but is there anything that's not similar to Section 8, how it has, in the way it runs?
It's fairly similar to it. The households all have to create a plan with a case manager, and they've got to have check-ins, regular check-ins, and to see how things are going. And they also get reevaluated at the end of the first year as to whether or not they're eligible to continue for up to the second
In
year.
many ways.
So it's fairly similar, except it's got a lot more required check-ins.
And there's more assistance for the transition for when it ends. It sounds like you said they come up with a plan, they have to meet and formulate a plan
And
for
that's,
when it ends, I assume?
yeah, and just for the family to come up with goals, a lot of times it's working on maybe some job training and job readiness. Sometimes it's, trying to go back to school, take classes part-time. So it's also kind of working with the family to identify long-term goals for improvement. But when that ends, there's not additional financial assistance. So a lot of it is spending time working on housing applications and showing them how to.
Transition out of the program.
Yeah, and showing them how to do a housing search. One other thing that we found is that a lot of the housing search programs, the financing and funding for that has really dried up. And that's an area that we see time and time again. We get feedback that there's really no great place that people can go to get intensive housing search assistance. And for a lot of households, just getting a list
I was just gonna
of
say,
places, they struggle.
well, what does the housing assistance search usually entail?
It depends on the household. And that's something that we're trying to do with our new Office of Housing Stability, because right now, the Housing Division has been unofficially doing this while still trying to focus on all of our programs. But, when somebody walks in crisis, you need to be able to respond and immediately help them. So it really varies by household. Some aren't familiar with computers, and so that becomes a barrier in and of itself in terms of how to start their housing search.
And also just the fact that there's not a lot out there within the
Right.
maximums and for the programs
Right,
and things like
and
that.
we
You
just-
you said there was only 6 for Cambridge that were able to stay in Cambridge with the Section 8 funds?
6
Somerville.
in Somerville that were
Somerville.
able to
Yeah,
use their
Somerville.
voucher in Somerville.
And then 20 had to go.
21
elsewhere.
returned it,
Yeah, because there
and the
just
rest
wasn't
went
anything affordable.
elsewhere. Yeah,
There just wasn't anything affordable, and then 31 just couldn't find anything at all.
21.
21,
Couldn't find
right.
anything in 10.
Okay, one more question, then we can let Kelly continue.
Well, it's around the same, Kelly, did they ever address the issue of foreign related is outdated? Because Somerville has a lot of huge houses, as we do in some areas of Watertown,
Right.
with group households that have been going on. And I thought that was fascinating, and I attended all these meetings, so.
Right. I mean, it is part of our ongoing discussion with the community. I mean, right now, the way it gets enforced is somebody complains.
Okay, so they haven't.
And then it's at that point that we go out to see the unit. But there are ongoing discussions about that. Yeah.
Just
And
one, before you continue, I want to acknowledge Councilor Donato has just joined us. He's behind you.
And so I just wanted to pick up with some other programs and information that might be useful. We revised our inclusionary zoning back in 2016, and when we did so, we added a third tier for our rental and homeownership. So for rental, it was for 50 and 80% of area median income. We added a third tier of 110%. And then for homeownership, it had been 80 and 110%, and now we've gone up to 140%. We also increased the requirement. We go by percentage of units. And so it had been 8 or more units, 12.5% get designated as affordable. And now we've decreased the steps. So at 6 and 7 units, they're paying a fractional payment. And then once they hit between 8 and 17, it's 17.5%, and at 18, it's 20%. And another thing that we added in that ordinance is every 5 years, we do a housing needs assessment. Our last housing needs assessment was in 2015. And in the ordinance, we required that we would undertake an economic and housing market needs assessment and financial feasibility study prior to June 30th. So we're about to roll out an RFP for that, because we wanted to see with this increase, how is it going? How is it working? And then the next area I wanted to touch on is, like Cambridge, we have an affordable housing trust fund. I can't stress enough how valuable and how much of an important role that trust fund plays. We've had it since 1990, and they administer 2 types of funds. The first is trust funds, and our sources for trust funds are fractional payments from inclusionary as well as linkage payments. And the linkage payments are for commercial projects that are 30,000 square feet or more. And our rate when I had first started at the city was $3.19. And as of December 2017, it's now $10 per square foot. We also added a jobs linkage, which is new for us, and that is at $2.46 a square foot for projects that are 15,000 square feet or higher. And we have a separate jobs trust that funding goes toward. To date for linkage, we've received $4.8 million. We have another $2 million that are going to be coming in under agreements that we have in the next few years. But I want to stress that this doesn't include the vast majority of blocks at Assembly Square, which we're in the process of writing agreements for right now. So linkage is just an incredibly powerful tool for financing. And then our trust also administers, and they were designated the housing arm by our Community Preservation Committee. So they administer CPA funds, and it's been a steady 45% allocation. The statutory minimum is 10%. And to give you a sense, between fiscal year 14 and 18, we've received a little over $6 million in CPA funds. And the next program I wanted to touch on is 100 Homes. We're proud of this program, and this was done in partnership with Somerville Community Corporation, which is our community housing development organization. And it was really designed to be nimble and to be able to reach in and remove properties from the speculative market and create affordability where none had previously existed through deed restrictions. And so Somerville Community Corporation got a revolving line of credit from the Mass Housing Investment Corporation, and that line of credit is used for the initial acquisition. And our CPA funds come in when we get to the permanent financing for the properties. And to date, we've secured 50 units of affordable housing, which is fantastic. And that's really been, for the most part, in 2017 and 2018. So it's really over the last 2 years. The largest property that they purchased was a 16-unit building. Most are smaller, like 2 or 3 families. And we've committed $9.8 million in CPA funds to 100 homes, which is more than what the trust has received to date to administer in CPA funds. So we are pursuing a $6 million bond for the 100 Homes program.
Could you go in a little more detail with that, Kelly?
Yeah.
That's a juicy one.
Yeah, sure. What is there?
Okay, so I was there and when I was listening, so there were 100 homes that you were looking to buy in the community. And so what you've done now is secured a line of credit with whom again? I'm sorry.
It's the Mass Housing Investment Corporation, and Somerville Community Corporation has that line of credit.
So they have a line of credit that they use. They find a house that they want to purchase. They can buy it because they have the line of credit.
And we've created some guidelines in terms of the types of properties, what we're looking for, what we can subsidize per unit.
Per unit, okay, and then as the CPA money rolls in, they use that to pay off. But
Correct.
There's some resistance from what I've heard on doing that here, so I'm just really very interested in knowing more about that.
The one thing I would say is that scattered site rentals can be a real challenge. And we're really lucky that Somerville Community Corporation has been willing to take that on. I think that in and of itself can be somewhat daunting.
So where you've got the 60 unit, that the community's probably a bit more comfortable with that because it's one place to manage rather than 2 or 3 little family houses scattered all over town.
Right, and what we're finding is, in a lot of cases, a lot of these properties were tenanted at the time, and a lot of the tenants meet our income eligibility requirements, so it's a really great way that we've been able to stabilize and preserve those tenancies. And so the income limits range. We've got some units at 50% area median income. We've got other units that are at 60, 80, and then 100% of area median income, which is the max that CPA can go up to. Yeah, and then other,
Sorry, there's a question.
oh, sorry.
Well, I'm starting to wonder how big your staff is.
We're small, we're really small. There's only 13 of us.
What?
Yeah, and that
13?
includes myself and the
How
director.
many people working on housing? 13? So why is that small? It's like,
So we just a year and a half ago, we got our first full-time staff member for inclusionary housing. And I didn't touch on this, but we do everything in-house. So we do a lottery for every time there's new units available. And we're doing all the income certifications, and it's a lot of work. So it's a small staff that are administering it. We also administer, in addition to the lead paint program, we have a housing rehab program. We also offer closing cost assistance and down payment assistance as well.
I'm sure you're aware that at about half your size, we have a staff of 1.
Yeah, I mean, we look to cities like Cambridge, and we are envious of their staff and their capacity.
They're at 14, and
But they have a lot more. I think they have 3.5 staff on inclusionary alone. And we just got a year and a half ago 1 full-time staff member.
We have 1 full-time person, inclusionary is 1 people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a similar situation. We're doing, it sounds a lot like, we do a lot of things in the house. This is kind of what we're doing, we were referred to as, particularly the character of things.
Right.
Okay.
That is neutral for a community. You offer first home buyer classes. When I gather, that's usually done through nonprofits. We teach our own.
Yeah.
We teach our own.
Yeah, we used to in-house. When Paul Mackey went to our Somerville Housing Authority, we had to stop that program.
Okay, continue.
Governor Baker's Housing Choice Initiative, Watertown as well as Somerville received a Housing Choice designation. There was a total of 69 communities. We just received recently a $200,000 grant to do preliminary design studies and construction documents in the Gilman Square area, and that's really to help with the connection of the Green Line that's going to be coming, and help with open space and affordable housing that we're building there.
And we didn't get ours.
We didn't get it.
Sorry.
Sorry.
But there's a cooling off period. Now that we've received an award, I think it's at least a year or so, or at least a grant cycle or two before we can reapply, I've been told,
right.
so.
Can we apply next year?
And then Somerville, like Cambridge, is part of the Metro Mayors Coalition. And as Cliff noted, the goal is 185,000 new housing units by 2030. HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, had issued a NOFA in the not-too-distant past for mainstream vouchers, and the city worked with our housing authority as well as VinFen and our Continuum of Care, which is our homeless providers, on an application, and they received funding for 28 new mainstream vouchers. And I know, Tony, you had mentioned, what about challenges? And you hear a lot about zoning or NIMBYism, but I just want to end on other challenges, which is just the high acquisition cost as well as the high construction cost. So to give you an example, our Waterworks project, which is 25 one-bedroom units for young and disabled or households 62 and older, we, through various sources of funds, including home and CDBG, CPA, historic CPA as well, and then our trust funds put $1,750,000 into that project. And Glen Street, 163 Glen Street, it's going to be a total of 11 homeownership units, 8 of which are going to be affordable at different price points, at 80, at 100, and at 110%. And we invested $2,893,722. So it's just, and that's 11 units, and
Wow.
it's a real challenge. But to the households that get these units, every unit counts.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions before? I'm sure we will in the discussion, but thank you very much. I also want to just acknowledge Council Lisa Feltner joined us also. Thank you, Kelly. As you see, both presentations so far have just been full of information, and we could be asking, I know I could be asking a lot of questions, and so we thank Cliff and Kelly for presenting. We have 2 more people to speak, and I'm going to ask Senator Brownsberger, who was nice enough to come over and talk a little bit about the mass housing bond bill. And there's some copies here. Okay. And then we're going to end up with Rachel's presentation. Yes.
Actually, I've been looking over Rachel's shoulder as she's preparing for her talk, and I see that actually a lot of what's. I was looking at your slides, Rachel. I couldn't help myself. I think she covers this ground in her overview of what's being done. I think that.
Sorry, it just doesn't get you on.
We're on TV, so if you
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, all right. So should I talk from here, or should you want me to stand up? I'm
Whatever's
delighted
easy.
to stand up.
Okay, well,
whichever.
why don't you go up to the, then you can't see Rachel's notes.
I can't see Rachel's slides. I can't give my talk if I can't see Rachel's slides. No, one of the things that the state does to speak to the problem of housing is support the production of housing through the housing bond bill. And the handout summarizes the elements of the most recent housing bond bill. Rachel, what was the last time we had a housing bond bill? It's been about 5 years or so? Yeah, so every 5 years or so we do this. So if you think about this, it's, it's a few $100 million a year of additional resources that come into play. I mean, if it's, $1.8 billion every 5 years, it's, $300 or $400 million worth of investment in housing. And it's through a variety of different programs, some of which are targeted to particular categories of needy tenants, people with disabilities, et cetera. Some of which are more generally targeted to different income levels. And the most significant segment, of course, is the funding for public housing, which is generally the one that we sort of understand best. It's the easiest to understand, and we have Brian Costellos here from Watertown Housing, who does a great job. It's one of the things we always feel eager to do is to support the work of the housing authorities across the state with adequate maintenance so that the housing that we're providing publicly is well maintained. That is kind of the short of it.
The housing bond bill is, this is at 1.8 billion over 5 years, Senator?
Correct.
Okay, and these are the categories that it's used for?
Correct.
So where does, Brian, where does your category fall here? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't see the back
There
of
is
the
a back
page.
page there. Sorry about that, Tony.
It's okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's important to note that one of the best questions asked tonight was on expiring use. How many affordable units have been built, how many of them have been lost through expiring use provisions, and the ones that were saved, how much did it cost? Those are very interesting numbers. Without the bond bill supported by Senator Brownsburg and the legislature, all of public housing would become expiring use. And the immediate need in bond money right now, statewide, $1.5 billion. So the $600 million keeps us afloat and keeps us sustainable, and we would be rapidly deteriorating without it.
So the expiring use, if I understand it from many, many years ago, is that once a building becomes expiring use, I think this is what Cliff was saying, was the owners can no longer participate in an affordable housing program, and that they can take those units, do what they want with them, redevelop them in some way, and put them on the private market.
They're no longer obliged to remain in the public.
They're not obliged to.
They could if they wanted to.
They could if they wanted, and if it's a nonprofit organization that has done the expiring use, as Cliff had said, that most likely they're more amenable to keeping it in the program. But if they're private developers, they could make a lot more money by marketing them putting them on the market. So how does the bond bill stop that from happening? That's what I was.
I believe there's a category within the bond bill that makes a contribution to preserving some of those units. Let's see.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. There's this program, CIPIF, is the Community Improvement Preservation Fund that's specifically for expiring use units. And there's also an increase in the bond bill to our state low-income housing tax credit. We currently it's funded at $20 million per year. The legislature increased it to $25 million per year with $5 million set aside for preservation. But I would add the reason why we have these expiring use properties is because there's been an acknowledgement that we can't build more public housing and support it. And, oh, I'm sorry. And so this has been, we can't build more public housing and support it. So this has been a way to create a public-private partnership, to create more affordable units, and then the deal is, you develop it, keep it affordable for so many years, and then after that, the option is out there to convert it. But we also have a Chapter 40T in place, which creates a whole process around notifying tenants, a whole effort to keep it in right of first refusal for the state, or the state can designate a local nonprofit. There's a lot of effort that goes into preserving these units.
So you had federal programs in the 60s and 70s that had very long time horizons, 40 years. And so those programs ended at that time. So, we're sort of in a cycle where a lot of these buildings that were built at that time are coming up, and we're dealing with that. But and the 40T stuff is really the state's compromise approach to, well, we can't stop them from, doing the things that we agreed they could do under the terms of their deal, but we can try to slow it down and make sure there's a decent transition period for tenants.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Bill, is there a way that you could incrementally buy units? I'm not going to say this the right way. Can a deal be made with one of these so-called landlords, then, so to speak, that knowing that that time is coming up, that they could incrementally buy units as the expiration date gets closer? So
Well,
would we
those are
wanna
big
be-
numbers. Those are big numbers. I mean, in Brighton, we've got buildings, that are 100, 300 units that are expiring use buildings. So when these buildings come up, it's a huge financial nut that sort of comes. It's not like the units expire a few at a time. No, that building's expiring. So you have to, it's a big number to figure out a way to fund. And so usually the conclusion is, we fight the battle, we have the conversation, but we don't end up. In a few cases, we've succeeded. There's,
By a percentage of the units?
yeah, there are partial solutions that people have fought for, but it's a hard problem to solve because there's a lot of units all at once.
Cliff, has Cambridge ever used any of this bond bill money?
Quite possibly, but I'm just not the right person to ask about.
Okay.
You had big, huge expiring use buildings at the Ringe Towers there,
Yes.
and I've never fully understood the solution there, but it's very complicated.
That one, and I think Anyway Memorial Drive, Marine Ave,
Yeah,
they were, I think, among the first expiring use projects that were rescued.
yeah.
Take a mic.
Just pass a mic, or,
Sorry.
here, he's got one right there.
Here we go. 808 Memorial Drive and one of the towers at Ringe Ave, one of the towers at Ringe Ave. There's actually two separate developments there, though they look the same. They were rescued quite a few years ago, and I think they may have been among the first in the state to take advantage of this. I'm not sure exactly how we have financed it in other cases. It's probably been a variety of sources, but I wouldn't doubt we've used these programs.
See, there's so many different pockets of money that
Yeah.
it takes a lot of expertise and a lot of
Yeah.
creativity
Yeah.
to save housing in using those resources.
Yeah.
Kelly, has Somerville used it?
We have.
How have you used the bond bill?
I wouldn't be the right person to talk to about that.
Most communities have used the bond bill, so when Somerville Community Corporation is building something, they'll apply for affordable housing funds through DHCD, or the low-income housing tax credit, any of these programs. So and the Public Housing Authority, of course, has been able to use the public housing money.
So these are, just one quick, I'm sorry if I'm dense, but when you say the units have been rescued, do you take some of this bond money and you go to the developer and say, here's some money. Take this money and leave us alone and let us continue to keep the houses?
It's not quite how so everybody knows how long the deal is going on. And there's a great database there's actually a state preservation advisory committee that's run by CDAC. We meet on a quarterly basis. We review all the, just a listing of what is expiring. And then there's a lot of different ways. Developers may reach out to the state or to Mass Housing and say, I'm interested in preservation. It depends market by market. It depends on the developer. There are some private developers who do want to keep properties affordable. So it's really a range of things. Some will reach out. There are times, we had the state product called 13A. You may have heard about it before. And that was, we had a crisis where we were going to lose 4,000 or more units in a very short period of time. DHCD and Mass Housing worked together to reach out to the developers, and they did a bunch of things. One is there were rental subsidies attached that had very low rents tied to it. They said, okay, if we increase this, will that keep you in the program longer? Okay, we have these other tools. Like if you were going to sell it or if you're thinking about selling it, what if we offered that? And so it's kind of a back and forth, and it's going on for quite a while.
And then because we have Chapter 40T in place, there's all sorts of notice provisions. There's a whole process now. And Chapter 40T has actually resulted, I was just looking it up, in the preservation of over 15,000 housing units since 2015. So that's, it's a very effective law. It's actually a landmark piece of legislation in the country.
Okay. Helen, would you know offhand how Watertown could benefit from the bond market, from the bill? Is there a way for us to benefit from it?
Off the top of my head, I mean, I think, the other folks in the room have expressed, I think one of the biggest issues that we have in Watertown, I think Jennifer talked about this a lot last month, is just sort of the size of, the properties that are available, and, these big expiring use projects or new developments, they're generally a lot bigger than what we have available here. So we're talking about kind of smaller pots of money for smaller, more piecemeal solutions.
So is there a place in here out of this list that we could tap, is what I'm trying to get
So
at?
Tony, I think that you're asking the right question, right? You're sort of calling people and say, what are the tools that we have? How can we do something
Yeah.
here? And I think the way I would think about this is that for any given project, if you're trying to finance a project, these are tools that can contribute to the financing of a new project or of a existing project, the preservation and the status of an existing project as affordable. And it's always a collection
Right.
of pieces, which gets assembled by people with expertise in the combination of federal tax credits, state tax credits, little tranches of money from different programs, as well as private capital in different forms. And so it's a really complicated technical area that's what developers get paid for. And it's very expensive. I mean, there's a lot. This whole approach that we have here is a very expensive approach because there's an awful lot of soft costs involved in figuring out how to weave together these various programs to provide enough capital to meet the need.
So what I was thinking of, just particularly, and I thank the Senator for, I think he's summarized it perfectly, but we were, and Helen and others, we were talking recently, and other people from the Housing Partnership, about the possibility of looking at the library in the West End as a West Branch Library, to think about that possibly, look at is it feasible to consider that as a unit, and Metro West Collaborative ran some very preliminary figures through that to see if we could have maybe 12 to 14 affordable units in that. And so what I was sort of driving at, and thank you, Senator, is there some part of this, could that be a piece of the financing? That's all I was driving at.
It's possible that some of this could be. I mean, the Housing Innovations Trust. I'm not sure which of these things. Each one of them has complex eligibility requirements, and it's a long dance. Okay. What I would say if you're thinking about one of these places is to put out some kind of sign of. You've got one consultation from the Metro Housing Trust, but you can reach out and put out some requests for responses and do that at a variety of different levels, and shape it so that you gather more information and have different developers throwing different ideas at you, both as to how they're going to finance it and what they can do with the property. So I mean, ultimately, you want that kind of competition and transparency to sort of say, who's got the best way of pulling all these pieces together.
Right. Great. Thank you, Senator. We appreciate it. Thank you very much, folks. I'm going to give Rachel a chance to get up there and get her PowerPoint in.
Rachel knows a lot more about this stuff than I do.
And while she gets her PowerPoint together,
You know how to get this stuff passed, which is hugely important.
I just want to note, and I apologize to Kelly. Kelly Donato, not only, as she said, has been 12 years with the Somerville housing folks, but she also serves Watertown in another capacity. She sits on our Zoning Board of Appeals, so just wanted to acknowledge her contribution, her expertise shares with us here in the town itself as a member of a very important board. You know, I often think those folks should be elected, but that's, no. A very important board, like the planning board. The ZBA is a very important board, and we appreciate her volunteering her time to be a member of that board. And while Rachel is getting ready, I just want to introduce her. Rachel is the Executive Director of the Citizens Housing and Planning Association, and after joining the agency as a Director of Public Policy in 2012 and 2016, she became the CEO. She's responsible for providing strategic leadership and oversight for all activities of the organization. She works in partnership with the Board of Directors to articulate and execute CHAPA's mission. Rachel previously worked as the Director of Public Policy at the Alliance of Business Leadership, served as Chief of Staff to Massachusetts State Senator Susan Tucker, and was the Senior Policy Advocate at Homes for Families, a nonprofit advocacy organization working to end family homelessness. Rachel holds a bachelor's in arts and political science and peace studies from the University of Connecticut, and we appreciate her being here tonight, and it's all yours, Rachel.
And apparently my computer skills are very poor. I've been working on a Mac for too long, and I can't find my presentation on here. Hold on. Where is my?
From some help from the audience?
Yeah, anybody else? I plugged in the thumb drive, but I can't seem to locate it.
Here we go.
Am I missing it somewhere? I used to be technologically savvy. I'm losing that skill. I don't think it's registering, huh?
No, it doesn't look like.
Yeah, I wonder if there's another, we try it on this side and see if it registers. Ooh, sorry.
There you go.
Where'd it go? There you, thank you. What would I do without the help?
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, hold on one second. It's coming. No, it's still not there. Your device is ready. What a pain. Hold on. Well, I can just read it to you if I can't figure it out. Hold on. I saw the device and then, I'll get started there. All this comes up. So, my name is Rachel Heller. I'm from CHAPA, Citizens Housing and Planning Association. And our mission is to encourage the production and preservation of housing that's affordable to households with low and moderate incomes, and to foster diverse and sustainable communities through planning and community development. And we do this in a few ways. I'm going to be fascinated if you pull this up. One is we advocate for opportunity. We do advocacy at the local, state, and federal levels. We also work on expanding access to housing. So for all the homes that we build, we want people to be able to get into them. So we administer the Mass Access Database for the state. That's the most comprehensive listing of affordable developments across the state. We also work with homeownership counselors across the state and administer a grant from HUD where we help provide that funding for people to work with first-time home buyers and buying homes. And then we also do a lot of work around Chapter 40B. There are many homes that we are actually the ones who are doing the rent certifications and making sure that homes are being sold or rented to people who meet the eligibility criteria. And then we work on developing the affordable housing field.
Awesome.
That's us, thank you. We work on developing the affordable housing field, and we do this in a lot of different ways. We do it through trainings, we do it through forums. We had one this morning that was about who is the M in NIMBY and how to expand the community engagement process. Thank you so much, Counselor. And then we also have a Young Professionals Network, which is meant to really grow the field of affordable housing development. Now let me turn this into a slideshow, and we'll be in business. So what I was going to do, I will not talk much about the bond bill because I feel like we had a good, you know what, I'm just having the hardest time tonight with this stuff. Hold on one second. There we go, that should work, right? So as I said, CHAPA works on state policy, and so the housing bond bill was our, it's not working. I'm not quite sure why. Any,
There you go.
Oh, look at that. Man, sorry about that. So the housing bond bill was our top priority for this last legislative session. And it's really the way that affordable housing is funded across the state. It's a major financing tool. And just to answer some of the questions that you had about could this work in Watertown, it could. As the senator was saying, kind of depends on the project, and it's really a developer-driven tool because it's about financing that project. So if you decided you were doing something with the library and a developer said, I'm going to develop that, here's the proposal, they could then enter into one of the state's funding rounds. They happen 1 to 2 times per year, and that's when these big announcements are made about housing developments that will be financed all across the state. So the housing bond bill has all these capital programs. This one also extended and expanded several state tax credit programs. I mentioned the state low-income housing tax credit program. It expanded the historic tax credit program, the community investment tax credit program, which Jennifer Van Kampen might have talked about. It's a very valuable tool for CDCs. And then this bond bill also created a commission to study housing for people with disabilities. Obviously, in Massachusetts, we have a very old housing stock, and it makes it even harder for people who need more accessible housing to find it. So now there will be a commission to look at that. We also worked on providing tools for communities through zoning reforms. Zoning is where all of our decisions are made about how we use our land, and right now we have very restrictive zoning throughout the state. And this is one of the reasons why we have such high home prices. So we worked on several bills that would have helped on this issue. One was our production bill. The key piece of that was requiring multifamily zoning in every community. If we have that kind of zoning in place, it helps developers to understand where communities would want to build. We know we need this kind of housing everywhere. This would be up to communities to decide where that goes. And ideally, it would be near transportation or town centers and be more of a smart growth way of development. There's also a more comprehensive bill, the Great Neighborhoods Bill, which had a mix of tools for communities as well as getting to the multifamily zoning. And then there was the governor's housing choice legislation, which would have reduced the voting threshold for upzoning from a 2/3 supermajority down to a simple majority. Unfortunately, none of these bills made it across the finish line this session, but I think the good news is how many people were engaged in this. To see the governor file a bill on zoning is important. To have senators and representatives all speaking about multifamily zoning and how we produce more housing for the housing that we so greatly need for people across income levels, it was encouraging. And so we are looking at next session, what is the kind of legislation that we can get passed that will help communities to provide the kinds of homes that we need. And then we also work on the state budget. So these are the programs that do a whole bunch of things. We have a few permanent housing programs in here, programs like the Massachusetts Rental Voucher Program. This is a state rental subsidy program that's like Section 8, alternative housing voucher program specifically for people with disabilities, public housing. This is something that we really hope to grow this year so that Watertown Housing Authority can really sustain those units and keep them in good shape. There's the capital side and the financing side, and then there's the operating side. And you need to be able to help with making these homes that are built really affordable, and it's really through rental assistance and making sure public housing is fully, is given the support that they need. There's also homelessness prevention programs like RAFT and Home Base, and then the Tenancy Preservation Program, a program which works in our courts to help people with disabilities maintain their homes if they're about to be evicted and it's something related to their disability that they can resolve with help.
Those are all out of the operating?
These are all out of the operating budget. And this is just a sampling. We actually work on even more than this. We're very fortunate, I would say, in Massachusetts that we actually do have a lot of wonderful programs. They're all oversubscribed. You heard the wait list in Somerville is just like everywhere else. It can be a decade before people get the help that they need. We have such a shortage of housing, and the housing prices, rents, mortgages are rising at a faster rate than incomes, and so we just have a lot of people struggling. So even as we grow these programs, and I really thank Senator Brownsberger for his leadership on increasing funding for these programs, we unfortunately need far more. So I would urge you all to help as we get into the next budget season to advocate for these programs. But no matter how much funding we get at the state and the federal level, all of the decisions are being made locally about how we develop affordable housing, how we develop housing, period. So CHAPA has launched a new municipal engagement initiative. And as you can see on the slide here, community support can make or break housing development at the local level, but many communities don't have strategies or coalitions to help get changes done at the local level. So what we do is we work with communities to help build support in communities, to build coalitions, to work with the many people, many stakeholders in a community who we know care about this and want to do something about it, to work together and to develop a plan, and whether it's a zoning change or a housing production plan or getting a lot of people to turn out in support of a particular housing development, we come in to help a community figure out how to do that and how to move things forward. And it's flexible because every community is different. We only launched this a year ago, so this is very new. And we went from working in 2 communities to 6. And every community is very different in what we're providing. So I'll get into one example in a moment. I also want to talk about what we're doing at the state level that complements this. There are many organizations that provide technical support to our municipalities. So one of the things we're doing is bringing all these groups together, and this actually isn't everybody. There's more that we will bring to the table as well, to work together, to coordinate, to make sure before we go in somewhere, are we needed? Is somebody else providing help? If a community reaches out to us and we're not quite sure we're the right fit, we now know who we might be able to refer them to. And we're all working together to understand what's happening in every single community across the state, so that if any community needs help, we should be able to figure out how to provide some assistance. And it can look a little bit different everywhere, but the good news is we're all working together on that. So what does success look like? It's really following a local strategy and supporting the efforts in each community to change the conversation, to build a culture that's more supportive of housing, including affordable housing, to bolster efforts that might already be happening in that community, and to overall grow the number of people that support housing production in each community. So in Acton, this was the first community we went into. And the reason why we went there to kind of test this out and start creating this initiative was because they, a couple of times, had lost a vote for rezoning by 18 votes. Very small, and the last time it was 18 votes that would have made the difference. And there's been so much effort at the local level from the planning department and the town, people in the town, to create affordable housing, that this just seemed like a place we might be able to help them turn that around. So what we've been able to do with Acton, and this was really, like I said, it's community-led, we helped to form a coalition. So it's not the same people who have been advocating for housing all the time. Now they've expanded that. They're starting to bring in some local business owners. They're reaching out to people who may be on the Board of Selectmen or are involved with some other committee in town. They have regular meetings now. They're really thinking, what do we want to do? How are we going to get this done? They developed a town meeting warrant guide so that everybody in the community knew what related to housing, what those questions meant, and what a yes vote would mean and what a no vote would mean. And that was a really great education tool for people. They're writing letters to the editor anytime something comes up around housing. They're writing a letter to the editor about it. It's actually the way that they found a new member of their coalition. Somebody else had just written a letter to the editor about the cost of housing in town, and it helped to identify more people to involve. They have an email list of supporters. They had a huge housing forum in July, not normally a time for good turnout, but they had this great forum that provided an opportunity to provide education on the need for housing in Acton and some of the strategies they were considering. So their next steps, they are forming a Google group. They're working on building on existing town efforts. So the town of Acton had received a grant from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs around housing and economic development, and that involves community engagement. And so they're thinking about how this coalition can work with that to continue to build more support. They're surveying people to understand the priorities, and they are developing a more formal structure for their coalition. And all of that is aimed at getting to housing production in the right locations in a way that the people of Acton are behind it. So it's, we're supporting them and thinking through that strategy and helping them to implement it. Since we started our work in Acton, we've also started working in 5 other communities. Some are at the very beginning stages. We just notified them in the last couple of weeks, and the other one, Medford, we've been in for a little while and are building off of these community conversations they had around housing. We're now able to help them turn that into an action plan. So with that, are there any questions?
Could you start at the beginning again?
Sure.
Could you say the other?
Sure, yeah, I can give the other towns. Yes, we are working in Newton, Amherst, Arlington,
Very
and
beginning, the
Essex.
stuff we missed. That's what I wanted to see, was the,
Some pictures.
Pictures?
no,
They're nice.
the next one.
Our mission?
Yes, I wanted to, so you don't actually produce housing, CHAPA doesn't?
No, we do not produce housing. We work to support the production
Production
and
of
preservation of housing.
housing.
And we work largely on the tools that make that possible, whether it's funding tools, legislative tools, that kind of work.
And you focus on low to moderate income housing production, right? So that's the goal, is to preserve it and to find ways to develop it, but you don't develop it yourself.
We don't develop it ourselves. And I would say too, something to know about CHAPA, we've now been around for over 50 years, and we are the place that brings all the different stakeholders together. So in our membership and in the various committee meetings we have for-profit developers, nonprofit developers, housing authorities, homelessness advocates, people who are building market rate housing, you know, for like more of a middle income. We have people who represent municipalities. We have lawyers who are working on the real estate side. Really bring all these different parties together with this mission in mind of how do we come together to solve the challenges that we're facing. So I'd say in the last couple of years, while our focus is on affordable, we've also been working on changing those zoning rules at our state level that are just about increasing the overall supply. Because what's happening is, because we're restricting housing so much, we're finding we now have to develop tools to provide subsidy to people who are between 100 and 120% of the area median income or more, because we're really constraining that supply. So if we can really reduce those restrictions, add more housing stock, then we can focus our financial resources on those more lower and moderate income people.
Rachel, how does the community
Yeah,
get
I'm sorry.
involved with you?
That was my
I'm
question.
starting to spin with all the different agencies we've heard.
I know it's a lot.
It's like, I just think of the duplication of effort and.
We're trying to reduce
money
that, yeah.
That you're spending on similar things, and I'm thinking, what about one umbrella? So with these communities, how do they get involved with you? What's the deal? How do you get paid?
All good questions. So first, I would say there are a lot of groups out there, and like I said, one of our goals with this is that we're not just helping particular communities. We're on the ground in 6 communities. We want to be able to assist everybody in some way. So certainly collaborating with all these other organizations, we're able to not duplicate effort so much. If we're going in somewhere and someone else is there, we know that it's going to complement each other. If somebody else is already there and says, we're on it for now, you know, the community will contact you when they're ready, then that provides now a way.
I'm real simple here.
How do people get involved with us?
Yes, because I'm
Do we call you up? and
Yeah,
then-
you can. So what we did,
Kind of
yeah,
checklist, because Watertown is certainly not like Belmont, and it's certainly not like.
that's where
Wayne.
I live. Did I say
So,
that?
So, you know, do you have a checklist of, okay, this is the kind of demographic profile of Watertown?
Mhm.
This is what they're already doing. Where do we fit in to help them move to another area,
I have a-
expand, whatever?
So a couple of answers to that. The first is how people access our municipal engagement initiative. We just had an open round for people to apply. 13 communities applied from around the state, and we told 4 that we will be working very on the ground with them. For the rest, nobody leaves empty-handed. We are doing a variety of things, depending on what it is they need. For some, let's connect you with Mass Housing Partnership. I know you had them here earlier, because it looks like they'd really be able to help you with this particular thing. For others, maybe it's the Smart Growth Alliance. For another community, maybe we can get a bunch of these groups to go for a day and do a good planning session with them and think about what's possible here and what might be a path forward. And then we just do kind of phone consultations too, and kind of we'll talk through, you know, what it is that you're trying to accomplish and what might be a path forward. And then the team that's heading up this group, this initiative, We'll also do educational forums. They'll go out and speak at events. They'll go into any town and have a meeting and try to figure out a path forward. To answer kind of where does Watertown stand, Mass Housing Partnership has a new data institute, and they are actually going to be releasing community profiles of every community in the state. And not only will you get a good sense of your own community, but they're also creating these cohorts. So who are we like? And what is that community doing? Or can we reach out to them? Maybe we can work together and start to think through some solutions. And the cohorts are not necessarily geographic, but more about characteristics.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so they're awesome. It's not my idea, but they're great. So they may look at, your demographics are very similar to so-and-so over here. You may have never thought you were similar to that community, but you're more similar than you realize. And I would just say, in addition to all of this, all of these organizations in CHAPA are constantly doing trainings as well. Mass Housing Partnership does a lot of trainings for housing trusts. We do on all sorts of, today was Who is the M in NIMBY, and it was all about how to build community engagement. 2 weeks ago, we had one on housing innovations, and what are the new tools that we could be using in Massachusetts that we're not? Can this impact price? Can it get housing built quicker? So I'd say there's a lot of kind of one day or morning things that you could go to just to learn a little bit more about new ideas for your community.
So there's no one place you can put your name in the hopper to get on a list that you could, how they have those things like answer yes or no to the question, you track here, answer yes or no here, track here.
If you call any of these organizations, we're going to put you in the hopper and we're going to connect you with somebody. You could call us tomorrow and we'll figure out what is it you're trying to do, and we'll try to help direct you to the organization that can best help you. So any of us is a point of entry. And we're all talking to each other, and we're all maintaining a list together of everything that's happening in every community, just related to housing and technical assistance, so that we have a sense, and we can say, well, oh, so-and-so is already there. Okay, maybe let me talk with them, see how I might be able to help, or maybe I'm not in the right group, maybe it's somebody else. So we're really trying to make it a lot easier for people to access these different tools. They're Mass Housing Partnership. They set up the institute. They have 2 or 3 people working there right now, and they're hoping to have some data before the end of the year that they can share with communities. It might be in the beginning of next year. Yeah, it'll be really helpful. I live in Belmont. You mentioned Belmont, so I'm looking forward to that tool just to see who we're really like and what kind of tools might be being used in those towns.
Counselor?
She actually asked.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, she asked the question?
She asked the same question I was going to ask, but just to follow up on that, so once you got involved with, if you picked our town.
Yeah.
So what does
What does it look like?
Yeah, so what does the program look like?
So what we do is our municipal engagement team meets with whoever is leading the work in the community, and that's even different depending on where you go. So one community, it might really be a town-led process that they want to change a zoning rule, they want a community, broad conversation. So we'll come in, we'll meet, we'll get a sense of it, develop a basic, letter of what we're agreeing to do and what they're, what that community is hoping to see. And then we start to help them organize those meetings, facilitate a conversation in their community, think about how to build a coalition. For some communities that aren't quite sure of where to go, we will spend time in community meetings and think about, okay, what are all the different things that are concerns here? What are some of the priorities? Okay, great, now let's develop a plan around that. So some communities really know what they want to do, and others, they know they want housing production, they're not quite sure how to get there, so maybe they want to try to add an inclusionary zoning tool. They're not quite sure that's the right thing. Maybe they need an affordable housing trust. So we'll work in a community process to help them figure it out and help them think through how do we get business leaders involved, or hospitals, or teacher, or whoever, whatever they think will be helpful to growing community support.
Any question? Go ahead.
What puts a community on the top of your list? Like you said, 5 out of 13 were chosen. What put them at the chosen?
It was
chosen ones?
it was so hard. One of the biggest things is that they want to, there's an end result of producing affordable housing. It could be commitment level, it could be the potential in that community, do they have the tools in place, or are they trying to put the tools in place that will lead there? We also wanted, we didn't know if this would work, we wanted geographic diversity because we want to see how this works in different places. So we were thrilled to get Western Mass, North Shore, all over the place applying because that allowed us to pick more things. But there's no one thing. It's kind of a bunch of factors. Is there the potential? Is there a group? Is there some sort of commitment from the municipality? It doesn't always have to be the town manager or the mayor. It could be the housing trust. It could be the planning board. Is there some sort of connection that's already being made there between an outside group potentially and the municipality?
Is there anything that would make a community less likely to be chosen, like those others that applied and weren't chosen? Is there anything in particular?
No, the communities that weren't chosen, we are really figuring out how else we can help them. I'd say the only reason why somebody wouldn't be chosen is if they really don't want to create housing. And that would be, if they apply, I don't know why someone would do that, but that's really the limiting factor.
So Rachel, if I can, I'm sorry to ask many questions. So as a starting point, I guess we should be looking at how many of these organizations do we already have some kind of relationship with? And in what way?
I could look that up for you.
I would love to have that information.
I could check.
Just to say, where do we stand here? Are we only tapping into 2 or 3, and what are we missing in terms of our overall? And I guess the other question, which is not really politically correct to ask, but is how much can be initiated by citizens around this issue? Because there seems to be some resistance in Watertown for citizen involvement, active citizen involvement in a lot of issues. And I think we have really good people that are very passionate about giving some time to these issues, but they keep getting closed out.
Well, so the whole premise of this initiative is that we're building up that community voice and working to bring it into partnership with the municipality. So rather than seeing it as adversarial, how do we build bridges? Now, in some communities, that might be harder than others. If a community has been pretty hard on housing, we have to look at that and say, okay, what can we do there? There was one community actually that applied, and they just voted down a big development. There's been kind of a very negative tone in that community. And we still are figuring out how can we help them, because there are residents in the community that want to build support. And so we're thinking about, okay, who can we connect them to? How can we help them? I would think about this group, this listing, as kind of a continuum. Mass Housing Partnership is a great one to go to when you're trying to figure out what to do, or you're looking to get help from a consultant who might be able to really just hone in on an economic development, like, cost-benefit analysis for a particular area in your community, or that kind of stuff. MACDC, they're doing a lot of work in the suburbs, working with groups like Metro West, who are doing a lot of trying to do development, trying to build support in the suburbs. Smart Growth Alliance is doing a whole bunch of things. Some is really kind of light touch, where they're just helping communities to build a culture. They started this new thing called TO Drinks, transit-oriented drinks. It could be about around a bus line or a train line. But the whole idea is, how do you start to get people into a room that are interested in these things? So everybody's Metropolitan Area Planning Council. There's DLTA planning grants through them. There's they help with housing production plans, although Watertown already has one. There's a lot of, kind of depends what you're looking for. So I wouldn't think about it as, let me look at this list and see who we're not using, but more, where are we? What do we want to do? And then which of these groups would be the next one to help us?
Okay. Could
Give me
you?
a little description of each one of
No,
those.
no. I'm sure they got a lot on their plate.
I can tell you who's helping Watertown.
I just wanted to, when doing a little bit of research, I found something you did for us already. This is expanding affordable housing in Watertown by CHAPA in May of 2018, just this past year. This is some piece of work that you did for us?
Somebody in my office did that.
Oh, okay. All right, well, you did that.
Let me see it, and then I can tell you who did it.
Well, it's sort of cut off a little bit. I was
Look at that.
Because if you found that on the website, Tony, you're Houdini.
no, I didn't find it.
I'm sure it was probably a municipal engagement initiative, or,
It's only May, it was only a couple
I'll have to ask which of my wonderful team
okay.
came, but I'm so glad we came here already to help. What more can we do?
Okay, so it's getting a little late. As usual, we could keep talking. We have a wonderful group tonight, as we have in the last 6 meetings. So I'm going to ask if there's any other questions from any of our presenters, for any questions for Cliff, or for Kelly, or for Senator Brownsburg, or for Rachel. Anybody have any questions? Okay, well, I want to first off take a moment to thank our presenters. I really appreciate it. Rachel, thank you. Kelly, thank you very much. Cliff, wonderful presentation, thank you. Senator Brownsberger, I know we've been trying to get you here. Thank you for coming. I know you should be celebrating rather than coming here, but we appreciate it.
What could be more fun?
What could be more fun? I'll just give you a little brief where we're going from here. This, as I say, was our 6th meeting. I haven't talked to my colleagues on the committee, but we are hoping that on the December meeting, we're going to take a little discussion of all what we have heard from and where can we what can we do to think about how to focus on some of the resources that we heard about, some of the programs, some of the ideas from other communities, what might work best in Watertown. We also, there's a few people who have been interested who want to present, just residents who want to talk a little bit and make a presentation. So we're going to allow them, encourage them to do that. We need to find a way to take all that we've learned, and it's not going to be easy. We're not going to do it in one meeting, that's for sure. We're also going to continue to find ways to partner with the Watertown Housing Partnership, because maybe there's some things that we might bring to the council for votes that we need to work on together, and so that we have their support and our support. So we got a lot of work ahead of us. I just want to appreciate everybody. I know I look forward to working with Susan and with Caroline to come up with something so that we can bring it to people like our colleagues on the council and say, you know, what do you think? Can we move this forward? So that's where we're at. You know, we have a lot of people we can turn to. We've met a lot of interesting and very wonderful people in this last 5-6 meetings. So we're hoping to move it forward.
Thank you, Tony, and thanks to all the presenters. There's a wealth of information out there. And I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Before, a reminder that whoever presentation, can you send me the presentation so we include it on our, when we do the minutes to the meeting? And you want to second that?
Yes, I'll second it.
And all in favor of leaving?
Yes.
Thanks, Tony.